into the month of August, so welcome. And this Sunday we have a word from the Gospel of John. That is where Jesus heals the man at the pool of Bethesda. Our Bible word is from John 5 verses 6, and our divine service is entitled Spiritual Health. Now, our Bible word reads, "When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he already had been in that condition a long time, he said to him, 'Do you want to be made well?'" So Jesus was coming to Jerusalem for a festival or some other pilgrimage feast. And quite often what you find in the Gospel of John is that Jesus comes to Jerusalem for some other pilgrimage festival, and some other event happens, and that festival or whatever it may be is used to explain the identity of Jesus, who he is. And the Gospel of John is unique because here Jesus travels back and forth between Judea in the south and Jerusalem and Galilee in the north. And we have mentioned in the Gospel of John of 2 or maybe even 3 Passovers that Jesus attended, that tells us he had a ministry of 2 or 3 years. And this is different from the other Gospels, where Jesus' ministry could have taken place in 1 year, because Jesus, apart from Luke's reference, he went there as a child. Other than that, Jesus only goes to Jerusalem at the end of his life for the crucifixion. But here in the Gospel of John, Jesus often travels back and forth between Jerusalem and Galilee. And now again here in chapter 5, he was in Cana, and now it says he's returned to Jerusalem for the feast. And here specifically, it's not a pilgrimage festival like Passover or the Feast of Tabernacles that is the main issue. Although it's a time of a feast, we're not sure what feast this was. The main issue here in chapter 5 is the Sabbath, because this was also a feast day celebrated by Jewish people, of course, every 7th day. So Jesus is here in Jerusalem. He comes to the pool of Bethesda. And the pool of Bethesda, if you look at our map that we see now on screen, if you look in the far south, there's the pool of Siloam. And there in chapter 9, that is where Jesus sends the blind man to cure himself. And that was a ritual immersion pool. Jews at the time of festivals, when they come to Jerusalem, they had to enter the temple in a state of ritual purity. They would make use of these big immersion pools, also called mikveh, and they would ritually immerse themselves to get rid of impurity. And then right at the top, there's also the pool of Bethesda. And archaeologists have recently come to the insight that this was also a ritual immersion pool. So the pool of Siloam in the south and now the pool of Bethesda in the north, these pools would have been used by pilgrims coming to Jerusalem to ritually immerse themselves so that they can get rid of ritual impurity before they actually enter the temple. And as we can see with the pool of Bethesda, it was located to the north of the temple area, as our Bible text also says, or the context of our Bible, near the Sheep's Gate. And there were actually 2 pools here. And the northern pool was a bit smaller than the southern pool. So the northern pool, that was actually a reservoir where rainwater collected. And water from this pool was led through to the southern pool that the people would use to go in for ritual immersions. And John also mentions that there were 5 porches or 5 porticos, and this refers to these porches. There were, of course, 1 for each side, and that's 4, plus the 1 that divided the 2 pools. So that's where this reference of the 5 porches comes from. And today, if you go to Jerusalem, you'll see a bit of the southern pool is still exposed, and you'll see there's columns inside, and these columns were built in this pool to support a church or various churches that were built later. And also, if you look down, you can see the steps. And these steps were across the whole width of the southern pool. And it's down these steps that the people would go down to ritually immerse themselves. And also, here's also a picture of a hole in this dividing wall between the northern and southern pool, where the water from the northern pool was let through to the southern pool to fill it up if the water became too low. So, the pool of Bethesda, it was a ritual immersion pool. It was given water or supplied with water by the northern pool, but it was also, according to popular folklore, it was a place of healing. People would come there for healing. Even after the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, pagans, the Romans, whoever came there, it was actually a site of healing. There was, for example, a marble foot that was given there as a votive offering, probably by somebody saying, "Thank you for healing my foot." And there was also a shrine of Asclepius. And Asclepius, he was the Greek god of healing. So there was, in popular folklore, this was also a site of healing. And obviously it derived its status already from the time of Jesus or before that this was a type of healing or a place of healing. And that's where we find this paralytic man here at the pool of Bethesda. And like John says, he was there for 38 years. And also take note that in the Gospel of John, Jesus performed 7 signs. So together with the pilgrimage festivals or the feasts, like the Sabbath day that we are dealing with here, where Jesus' identity is revealed. Throughout the Gospel, like in the first half of the Gospel, Jesus performs 7 signs. And with these signs, he also reveals his identity, who he is. His first sign was changing water into wine. Yeah, in our Bible word this Sunday, it's the 3rd sign. And that is where the healing of this disabled man at the pool of Bethesda. So our textual unit is John 5 verses 1 to 16. And that is where Jesus heals on the Sabbath. So Jesus now has come to Jerusalem and he sees this man there at the pool of Bethesda. And this popular or place, according to popular folklore, which is a place of healing. And our text words, now if we read from verse 5, it says, "Now a certain man was there who had an infirmity 38 years. So, according to this account, he was there for a long time. And the text word goes on, and Jesus actually asks him, if we come to our text word now, when Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been in that condition for a long time, that's 38 years, he said to him, "Do you want to be made well?" So now our man, he misunderstands Jesus, because if you read in verse 7, he says, "Sir, I have no man to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. But while I'm coming, another steps down before me." So this man, he always misses out at this popular place of healing. Then Jesus said to him, "Arise, take up your bed and walk." And immediately the man was made well, took up his bed and walked. So his bed, of course, it would have been just a place, it was a basic thing that you owned as a poor person. It was made of palm leaves. It was quite a thin thing that this poor man would have lied on. Now, for shock effect, the author of John introduces the next, or that it was a Sabbath, when he says in the next verse, "And that day was the Sabbath." So this is now setting up for, something's coming now, because this was a Sabbath day. So why is it the Sabbath? What's so special about this? Maybe for us today, it's not such a big issue. But for a Jewish person in the 1st century, this note, it was a Sabbath day, introduces, what's going to happen now? There's something going to happen here, because the Sabbath was an important day of observance for the Jewish people. Then the Jews come into the picture, because now the Jews therefore said to him who was cured, "It is a Sabbath. It is not lawful for you to carry your bed." So if you go read the law of Moses, you must not work on the Sabbath, and you're not allowed to carry anything on the Sabbath day. So they see this man, "Why are you doing this work? It's a Sabbath day, and you're carrying your bed. That's not allowed." Now, for some of the sages and rabbis, if you broke one of the commandments, you broke the whole law. And especially this is even more true if you break one of the heavy commandments. Now, this was one of the 10 commandments, the Sabbath day. And if you break the Sabbath day, that is, you destroy the law. You have disregard for the whole law. So they ask him, "Why are you carrying your bed on the Sabbath day?" And now the man answered them, "He who made me well said to me, 'Take up your bed and walk.'" Then they asked him, "Who is the man who said to you, 'Take up your bed and walk'?" So now they have an issue. Who's this guy who told you must break the law, break the Sabbath law? Who is this guy? Show him to us. But now this man, as yet, he didn't know who Jesus was. Jesus has disappeared. He made his way away from the pool of Bethesda. And now the narrative continues that Jesus went to the temple. And because the pool of Bethesda was situated close to the temple, Jesus actually sought this man out. And Jesus also tells him, "Look, you were committed a sin. That's because you were in this condition. So do not sin again. Otherwise, who knows what will happen?" But Jesus warns him, because of your sin that you were in that condition. Don't do it again. Now the man, he sees Jesus, and now he tells on Jesus. He becomes a betrayer. Because if you go and read in verse 15, the man departed and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well. So the man who Jesus made well, he goes and tells on Jesus. He betrays him. He says, there's the man. That's the man who cured me. And that's the man who told me to carry my bed on the Sabbath. This is quite in contrast to the narrative we find in chapter 9, where that man, Jesus sends a man to the pool of Siloam to get rid of his blindness. And that man became a follower of Jesus. He believed in Jesus. So the two healing accounts are very similar. But in the one, there's a positive response to Jesus in chapter 9. The man becomes a follower of Jesus. Here in chapter 5, the man does not become a follower of Jesus. He, in a sense, betrays Jesus. And here he speaks of the Jews. It can also be translated as the Judeans. And the Judeans, the Jews, they are the opponents of Jesus. In other words, those who live in Judea, the province of Judea. But of course, Jesus himself was a Jew or a Judean. All his first followers were Judeans or Jews. But in Gospel of John, the Jews or the Judeans, they refer to opponents of Jesus. At the time of Jesus himself, and later on for the Johannine community, we're speaking here probably of the 80s or 90s of the first century, probably in Asia Minor, where the Johannine community was based. There was also powerful, influential Jews or Judeans who opposed Jewish Christians, the followers of Jesus. So here we have this account of this man at the pool of Bethesda. He's cured by Jesus, and Jesus, for the man to carry his bed, it was a celebration. It was to celebrate this miracle that he's been made well. So Jesus here challenges people's interpretation of the Sabbath, because for them, this man broke the commandment. He worked on the Sabbath. For Jesus, it was a celebration of healing that took place. So the issue is the Sabbath. The approach of Jesus to the Sabbath is different to the Jews or the Judeans, his opponents. And unfortunately, this man here, he does not become a follower of Jesus, unlike the man healed in chapter 9. So that's it for this Sunday. Thank you for joining me, and keep well.